So yeah, a common discussion that I'm seeing now in different groups on Facebook that I'm in, of these ex-JW groups, which are quite handy, I find, actually, for people who are sort of leaving the religion, the cult, whatever you want to call it, and kind of don't know where to go. I kind of wish that I'd found these, it's not so much a case of finding them, because we all know that these kind of groups and sites like this channel that you're listening to right now, we know they exist because we're warned off them for so many years, you know. The A word scares us off, and we're too scared to look at these kind of sites and see things from a different point of view. And being in these groups, I kind of understand why. Well, I really understand why. Because people are actually looking at what the Bible teaches, comparing that to the Jehovah's Witnesses and their teachings, and they finally realise that they're not one and the same. Excuse me. And that is actually very hard for people who are still Jehovah's Witnesses to understand or accept, that what the Bible teaches and what the Watchtower teaches aren't the one and the same thing. Because if you talk to any of them, which I'm sure you have done before, your family members, your congregation members, ex-people that you used to know, maybe your kids, your ex-husband, your ex-wife, whoever, maybe your neighbour or colleague, and you've tried to say, the Watchtower teaches this, but the Bible, what we're supposed to be living from, that's why it's called the Bible. I mean, we say that, don't we? You know, people buy each other gifts like, this is the handyman's Bible, or this is the fashionista's Bible, or whatever. It's like it's become a word now we associate with a book that we live our lives by. That's what, I mean, the word Bible itself means a collection of books, like bibliothèque is Spanish for library, because that's just what it means, a collection of books, because there are 66 books in all in the Bible. But we've come to associate that word now with a book or a manual that we live our lives by. So when it comes to the Watchtower and we see how badly their teachings have deviated from the spirit of the Bible, I mean, I remember that scripture, honestly, I can't remember which one it is exactly, I couldn't quote it to you exactly, but the essence of it was something like, we shouldn't just pay attention to the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law also, you know. In other words, if the law says something like, don't steal, then it's not just, I won't steal from this person, but I'll borrow it without asking and never give it back. But it's not stealing, because if they ever ask me back, I'll give them back. It's the spirit of the law, which is basically, don't take something from somebody else when it doesn't belong to you, when you don't have any permission. And that's the spirit of the law that should affect our morals and our principles in life. We shouldn't just do things to the letter of the law, you know. So when it comes to the Bible and its message, its spirit of the Bible, what is it? It's love. Wasn't that the greatest commandment, that we should love God with our whole heart, our whole soul, our whole spirit, and all the rest? And then what is the golden rule? You should, don't quote me on this either, because it's been a long time since I've delved into this stuff, but isn't it something like you should love other people as yourself, treat them as you want to be treated, that kind of thing, love your neighbour? In other words, the message of the Bible, especially the New Testament when Jesus came to earth, was love. And so when there's a practice that is preached by a so-called Christian religion that actually smacks of hatred, intolerance, you know, like a bigoted attitude, is this love? Well, we would think no, it's not actually. And the mad thing is, they try to disguise their intentions by dressing it up as love. That reminds me of the scripture when it says about the sheep, which are actually wolves in disguise, wolves in sheep's clothing. Isn't that what they do? They disguise their teachings, their messages in a cloak of love. We disfellowship people because we love them. You know, what do you mean you love disfellowship people and that's why you do it? Well, they say the reason that we disfellowship people is for two reasons. One, that we protect the congregation because we love them. And the second one is we want to basically throw the disfellowship person out into the cold, cold world where there's nothing for them. They have no family, no friends, no future. They look at the disgusting things in this system and they want to come back. And so we basically shocked and scared them into coming back because we love them so much. It's like throwing a child who wants to swim. I want to swim in the pool, Daddy, I want to swim. And Daddy says, no. And then one day the daddy just throws the kid, throws him in the freezing cold pool. The kid's in shock, climbs out, thinks, I don't want to go back in there again. And it's the same thing with the organisation. They want to scare people into leaving the organisation. The ones who leave are thrown out into the harshest conditions that you can think of. And funnily enough, it's not from the external influences at all. It's a treatment from the internal influence. That's the problem, you know. The fact that you're shunned by your family, by your friends, by people that know you. People that don't even know you, but people who know of you. I've had that before. People I've spotted them at assemblies and at Kingdom Halls in the past. I couldn't tell you the name. They probably don't know my name, but they see me, and you know, they used to anyway, and they'd turn around and they'd walk away. And I'd think, blimey, even they know. I mean, when I was disfellowshipped, people in Australia knew. All the way in Australia knew that I was disfellowshipped, and I thought, this is insane. How word flies around. And at the same time they claim, oh, we're not gossipers. Gossipers are discouraged in the Kingdom Halls. No, they're not. Dear me, they have nothing else to live for except for gossip. It's the biggest thing they have in life. Scandal and gossip, and who's marrying who, and who's split up, and who's having a baby, and who got disfellowshipped. It's all gossip, gossip, gossip. You go to the assemblies and conventions, and what does everybody do? They meet up and they trade gossip, and then they all go away again with new stories and new scandals to think about. So yeah, but what this point of this video is I've been looking at these different groups, you know, and they've really been helping me so personally. And I mean, okay, in these groups, people have all different opinions. Some groups are very anti-religious altogether, and it's just for people who are exiting the religion and just want to focus on being human beings again. I find those ones, for me, are the best ones. There are other groups which are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, but everyone's a mix. Some people have left, some people have become Christians again, some people have been... I mean, there's someone on there that was a Wiccan, I saw that yesterday, and some people who challenge things like the Trinity and then say that it's true and other things. Most of the things I don't believe. But that's okay, because I've finally gotten to a point where I realise that if people voice their opinions, it's not going to change mine. I'm open to reading other people's things and thoughts and opinions, fine, but I measure it up to what I believe and what I've learned, and if it doesn't measure up, then I will politely dismiss it, you know. And we all have a right to do that in our lives. That's the way we should do it. Be open-minded, but protect our own beliefs. I mean, for example, I was talking to somebody yesterday. She was a very staunch Catholic. She was in her 70s, I think. And we were talking about what happens after death. And I said something like, well, the Bible... She said to me, what does the Bible say then? And I said, well, the Bible says that when you're dead, you're dead. You go back to the earth, you're dust. But one day, God will resurrect you. And to live on the earth, and hardly anybody will go to heaven. That's just what I've learned about the Bible. I mean, a lot of people challenge the whole idea of going to hell or going to heaven or staying on the earth anyway. Even people who were Jehovah's Witnesses say things like, well, how can we be in paradise if we're on the earth, blah, blah, blah. But my thoughts on it are what I just said. And then she said her thoughts on it were that when we die, if we're good, we go to heaven. If we're bad, we go to hell. And when she said that, my first instinct went straight back to the Jehovah's Witness training, which is, you should reason with her. Get the Bible out, show her all the scriptures that you think back up your claim, and then she'll probably show you scriptures that back up her claim if she knows the Bible. In fact, I find that Jehovah's Witnesses rely on people's ignorance of the Bible to teach, because most people know full well that the common person, even if they are religious, couldn't just pick up a Bible and pick up, you know, scriptures like Jehovah's Witnesses do and use those to strengthen their claim. In fact, it's the people that do that who are either the scary ones on the ministry or actually apostates, because that's what they view them as. People who use the Bible to their own ends, ironically. But anyways, once again, the purpose of this video is to discuss what I keep seeing in these threads and groups, which is actually the possibility of the demise of the Watchtower. People keep talking about that. I've never even considered that as a possibility, honestly. But people are sort of talking about it now, and it got me thinking, because it's possible. I don't think it's likely, but I think it's possible. Because people are talking about the Watchtower now that they can see that it's just a fake organisation, it's just a corporation, it's just a business, it's a fakey religion just like the rest of them. That means it can be destroyed. Same with everything in this system that is considered false, especially if you still believe in Jehovah and what the Bible says about false religion and that it will be destroyed, you know. And if the Watchtower and the Bible and Tract Society is in fact a part of that false religion, which I personally believe it is, if you do or don't, that's up to you, you know, then, you know, that it will be destroyed, right? And I paused there because I remembered what I was going to say earlier about that Catholic woman. When she talked about heaven, and that's where she just believed that she was going to go. Despite my witness training, I sort of stopped myself and I said to her, listen, I'll give you some advice. Never change your opinion for anything that isn't a good reason. You know, people give in to pressure. The witnesses use that a lot. They pressure you, they show you all these scriptures, they ask you questions such as, do you agree? In which case you feel pressure to say, yes, I do, even if you don't, just because, you know, you feel like that's what they want you to say, so you just say yes. But in the end I realised that there is live and let live, you know? I think I have confidence personally that if there is somebody whom Jehovah wants, I mean, the scriptures say that he draws each one of us to him, if that's what you believe, again. So I honestly am much more laid back about people knowing Jehovah and being saved, because the Bible says that Jehovah knows those people that he wants. People with good hearts. I mean, I know plenty of people who are, you know, considered bad by other people's standards, but I know them and I can see that they have a lot of good in them. And if I can see that as an imperfect person who's like an ant compared to the universe and less than an ant, then how much more would God notice the good in somebody? And so I have faith that he'll sort things out in the end. I can't imagine that he would destroy a good person, a kind person, just because they didn't go to a meeting. I just can't see that happening, honestly. And if so, wow, that's kind of cruel, honestly. That's kind of cruel to do that when there's a lot of potential in people. I mean, it's funny how they say, oh, God doesn't approve of abortion, but when it comes to Armageddon, anyone who hasn't accepted the truth is going to die. And it's like, wow. In that case, then, why don't you support abortion? Because it would make Armageddon a whole lot quicker if there were less people around, you know, to get rid of if they were already aborted at birth. I mean, how bad is that? What a strange attitude they have. But yeah, thinking of the possibility that the Watchtower may, either shrink up or be gone completely is an interesting one, actually. Presently, people are talking about different ways. And of course, the main thing on people's minds is the internet. You know, back in the day, we didn't have much in the way of research materials. We had everything that the organisation gave us, which were big fat books, with no pictures and everything like that, you know, back in the 80s, 70s and whatever. And then it progressed to books with pictures in them. And then I think even my mother had like My Book of Bible Stories version or something. And it had like no pictures. It was very drab, very boring, very, you know, academic in that sense, like going to school again, a boring school. And she hated it. And then they brought the one with the pictures out. I think that was in the 70s maybe, or the 80s, I can't remember. And then they brought out the newer one with less gory pictures in it. And then all the kids are liking that one. But the thing is, back then, I mean, there was no proper internet like we have today. You know, there was no proper Google or Safari or iPads or iPhones or Macs or whatever. And back then it's hard to find out information without going manually into books, magazines, newspapers, digging out old copies from libraries and whatever. And who's got the time for that these days? Nobody, you know. So in the end, they just relied on what the society's telling them to read from. Here, a convenient library, the Kingdom Hall, read from there, and that will tell you everything. Personally, I doubt the whole 607 BCE nonsense. From what I've read in other sources, the Jehovah's Witnesses are the only organisation in the whole world who actually say 607 is when Jerusalem was destroyed. Everyone else, I think it was 584 BCE. Don't quote me again, I'm just taking a wild guess here. But I'm pretty sure that it was around 15 to 20 years before or after or something that they said that it was 607. It wasn't the right date. But these days, things have changed, right? I mean, we all have smartphones these days. Well, nearly everybody. We have tablets. We have iMacs. We have the internet at school, at work, in college, in shops, on the streets. There's Wi-Fi everywhere. And everybody's used to this now. If you have a question about anything, how do I put this screw in? How do I make this kind of food? You know, what plug goes where? How do I drive a car? Blah, blah, blah. You know, we automatically reach for the phone or whatever and Google it. And the information is accessible to us in the fraction of a second, and it's there. Unless you have rubbish Wi-Fi, in which case it would probably take about 10 years to load. But the thing is, with the Watchtower now, they're losing control over people's minds. Because it's like people in North Korea or in China or in other communist countries where the internet and whatever is censored, and I think it's the intranet, where it's like a controlled web. So only approved materials can be put on there and browsed by the people. And I'm pretty sure that if the witnesses could have their own way, they would limit all of its members to only certain sites, or maybe one big mother site, as it were, by the witnesses, so they could control everything that these people are reading and watching and listening to. But thankfully they can't do that yet. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they tried. Because it wouldn't take much, let's be honest. Like all religions really, Jehovah's Witnesses rule by fear. You make people scared and they will do anything you say, especially when it's something big like Jehovah will kill you at Armageddon if you don't obey. You'll lose Jehovah's approval. And come on, everyone, even ex-witnesses I'm sure, being threatened that Jehovah is disapproving of you, that he's sort of frowning down from heaven upon your conduct and you're a bad Christian now and, you know, he's not happy with you. Your prayers aren't going to be listened to and all this nonsense. It makes your stomach turn. It makes mine turn. And I know that it's just a lie. But that's what we're all afraid of. Don't watch that film. Jehovah wouldn't watch that film, would he? What would Jehovah think about that movie? And you're there thinking, oh no, it has a swear word in it, or it has a scene where two people are fighting or whatever. And you feel bad and guilty and kind of scared, like, oh no, what's the point of praying now tonight because Jehovah's not going to listen? So it's a bit stupid, but they rule by fear. And honestly, I think if they published in enough Watchtowers and Awakes, and they're not called Kingdom Ministry Schools now, Kingdom Ministries now, they're called something else. I think it's just called a study sheet or something. I can't remember. But it's like an updated, modernised version of the Kingdom Ministry leaflet for the Thursday or rather midweek meeting that you have. I'm sure if they published in there enough times that the internet is bad, that is from Satan, that is filled with pornography and all this nonsense and apostate stuff, I'm pretty sure that if they put out an outright ban, they would stop people from going on it. Because, let's face it, in the past they used to only discourage people from going into higher education, and that worked pretty effectively without it being an outright ban. Because as that guy from XJW, Critical Thinker, says, they create a culture in which going to university or college is perceived as being like selfish or ambitious or materialistic. And so you don't want to do something that associates you with bad qualities, so in the end you turn it down, whilst being praised for doing so as if this is your free will. No, it's not. It's pressure from your community who say, well, we're not going to tell you what to do, but we are. So you can obey us, but you're not really obeying us, it's just your conscience. You know, or disobey us. You're not disobeying us, you're just disobeying God or whatever. It's a lie. They tell you what to do. And now that they have banned higher education completely, how many witnesses do you know or have you known who have disobeyed that and just gone to university or whatever without a smidgen of guilt? Because I don't know anybody. I know plenty of people who wanted to. I know plenty of people who were in the process of applying and quit. I know people who did it on the sly and, you know, via like stuff like Open University, learning at home, and they felt terrible. And it's so stupid. And that is just one thing, higher education. Now, what if they did that for the internet? Everybody's banned. I wouldn't be surprised if a great majority of people obeyed because they are used to obeying. The Watchtower says jump and everybody just does it, you know. And if you're stupid enough to ask why, then you're kicked out. You know, you're for the high jump, then that's even worse. So it just makes me wonder if the Watchtower Society are going to start realising that because the internet is so accessible, that things like their letters to the United Nations are now available as PDFs. You can find them. I've got them myself. They're scanned. You can read them. The letter from the UN. The other letter saying that they wanted to stop being a member and disassociate themselves, ironically. You can read them. Those things do much more, they have much more of an effect on you than someone just merely mentioning it to you. Because, come on, I'm sure most of us listening who are really passionate about the actual truth, not the Jehovah's Witness truth, but the actual truth, I'm sure we've all tried to tell somebody the truth. You know, for me, it was my mum. I go to my mum and I say, Mum, did you know that the Jehovah's Witnesses were part of the United Nations for 10 years? No, they weren't. That's a lie. And it's like, what can you do to convince them? Nothing. They already have the idea that anything that is shocking or surprising or confusing is just a lie automatically, which is nonsense. So, I'm just wondering. But the thing is, when you see things in print, you see the actual letters, instead of just dismissing it as a rumour or a lie, you start to see it for what it really is. You're looking at something that has the Watchtower letterhead on, it's got the date, it's got the correct address, it's written in language that is familiar, and it's inclusive only to elders and things. So straight away you get the feeling of, oh no, I'm reading forbidden stuff here. But it's on the internet, so who cares? And it has a greater impact on you than just hearsay, which can be dismissed as, oh, they're just bitter or apostates or nutcases or whatever. So I'm wondering if the Watchtower Society will realise how much an effect it's having, especially with this Australian Royal Commission, and hopefully the ones that will follow in America. I heard of a case in Quebec as well, and the Manchester case that's going on in the UK. Hopefully more will be unearthed soon, and other places like Ireland and, you know, Europe and other places like that. That would be great if they could do that. And the thing is, anyone who goes on the BBC or on RTE or anywhere else, the news sites, you click on them and it comes up with random news things because you're innocently reading the news or you're having your breakfast or you're commuting to work, and bam, there is an article about the Jehovah's Witnesses sex abuse cover-up. And of course, if you're a Jehovah's Witness, you see the words Jehovah's Witness and there's an article about you guys, so you click on it and you read it and you think, oh dear, this isn't a nice one. We're not the heroes in this story. What's going on? It must be a lie. But when you read it, it has more of an impact than someone merely saying, do you know what's going on in Australia? Because then people can dismiss it and carry on and not think about it with a good conscience, you know. So if the governing body do decide that the internet is now spelling their end, I would not be surprised. In fact, I highly anticipate a move to ban Jehovah's Witnesses from using the internet for anything other than strict research in other matters, maybe for school or whatever. And even then, I wouldn't be surprised if they said, well, if you're at school and they want you to research, go to library. If they want you to research elk or conservation or whatever, go to the library or read the newspaper, but do not go on the internet. I wouldn't be surprised. But anyway, that is one way. That is one thing that is happening that people are wondering about. Is the internet going to spell the end? Are more and more witnesses going to end up accidentally logging on and clicking things like on the news or whatever? That will lead to questions, which will lead to more searching, which will lead to so-called apostate sites, which will lead to people's eyes being opened and thinking, hang on a sec. These aren't dangerous lies. This is the truth. It may be uncomfortable and embarrassing to listen to. It may make my spirits, you know, swell up with rage because I don't want to hear this stuff. But if it's true, it's true. You know, it reminds me of being patriotic, actually. Anyone who is even mildly patriotic towards their country, let's say that you're an American and you love America, even if you don't realise that you do. You're born there, you live there, your whole identity is wrapped up with the USA. You know the history, you know the presidents, you know everything about it. And then you hear somebody who's a foreigner slagging off the United States, and what do people do? The hairs go up on the back of the necks, they start being aggressive, and they're like, you know, don't you say that about my country, kind of thing. Even if they privately slag off their own country. It's different when somebody else does it. You know, even if you didn't realise that you're patriotic, you automatically kind of defend your own country. I mean, look at the British and the Irish. We moan about the country all the time. Look at the Ishka water problem, look at the president, look at the prime minister, look at the queen, blah, blah, blah. All we do is moan. Look what happens when it snows, everybody comes to a standstill. And yet, hang on a sec. When somebody else says, oh, Britain's a rubbish country or Ireland's a dump, what do people say? Don't you say that about my country? And they become defensive, no matter what their private reservations are or their own thoughts and opinions. When somebody attacks their country, they blow up. Why? Because it's part of their identity and they feel like they're being attacked as well, which they are. If you're slagging off somebody's country, you're slagging off them. And people don't like that. And with the Jehovah's Witnesses, it's the same thing. If you say that your organisation is twisted, it's a lying, it's a lying cult, It persuades people to do things out of fear and obligation and all that stuff. People get the backs up straight away. They don't want to hear, because what you're saying is your identity is worthless. You need to change it. And they don't want to hear that. They just want to carry on being themselves. And to take away somebody's identity is traumatic. And that's why disfellowshipping is so cruel, because it takes away your identity. I mean, being a witness, what is the main thing you say about yourself? You introduce yourself. Hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses. It's like the next thing you say, before you say where you're from and what your birthday is and whatever. The fact that you're a Jehovah's Witness always comes right after your name. It's the first thing you want people to know about yourself other than your name. I mean, you get witness kids, they move to a new school, they stand up and the teacher says, tell us about yourself. And what do they say? My name is Johnny or Susie or whatever, and I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now imagine taking that away from them, and they stand up in class and all they can say is my name is Johnny or Susie, and then they stop because what they were going to say they can't say anymore, and it hits them. Wow, I'm not a Jehovah's Witness anymore. And it can really mess you up, even if you disagree with the whole thing, because it's taken away your identity. You know, the same as Donald Trump banishing everybody in the States who disagree with him. Yeah, they don't want to be under his rule, but taking away their citizenship and so they're not Americans anymore by law would really mess them up, no matter what their thoughts were of their country. So yeah, anyways, that was just one thing anyway. You know, the internet may be spelling the end for the Watchtower, hopefully, that people will log on, read things, learn the truth, tell others, and it will spread that way. And in the end, the only people left in, hopefully, may be like the older folk who stubbornly hold on to even the old teachings that they used to say, and they will eventually sadly die out, and then that will be that. So that's one possibility. But the one that I'm personally thinking of, and I would be really interested to know people's thoughts on this. So if for goodness sake, if you do have thoughts on what I'm about to say, please leave it in the comments or something, because I really am interested to know how people view my theory anyway. And maybe you've had similar thoughts. Now cast your minds back, if you will, a couple of years. Probably, I guesstimate, probably 8 years or so, I'm not sure. I remember being at a convention in the Britannica Stadium in Stoke. And during the announcements, when everybody's standing up and wishing they could sit down, the brother on the platform was going on about France. Now, if you were there, you will automatically know what I'm going to say next, because it was a big deal at the time, plenty of hoo-ha about it. And that was, the French government had enough of the Jehovah's Witnesses, didn't they? And they were trying to take away their status, as far as I can remember, as a charity. So they would no longer be exempt from taxes. And the French government were trying to be innocent and saying, well, that's all we want, just to take away their charity status. They can still operate if they want to, but they're just not a charity anymore. And the Jehovah's Witnesses fought fiercely against it. They took it to the European Court of Human Rights and whatever. Why? Simply because if they have to pay taxes, they will go bankrupt. If they go bankrupt, the kingdom halls and all of the assets will be seized. No more literature. Nowhere to preach. Nowhere to sit down and have a meeting. Everybody's disbanded. So of course they can't operate if they're bankrupt. No business can. And so they fought against it, and they told the court something like, oh, the French government's real motives is to bankrupt us and cease, operating. So we'll cease operating. And so the court agreed. They basically said to the government, well, that seems correct to us that you have these ulterior motives. Therefore, the witnesses win. So they got away with it, and they were allowed to continue as a charity and operate as normal. But it got me thinking, because the reason they are a charity is because they supposedly offer a public service, in that they go out, they preach about religion. I mean, for goodness sake, I don't know how they exactly qualify as a public service, honestly, because they're hardly postmen and women or ambulance people or whatever. But they claim that they do some good for the community anyway, and that is why they are a charity. And that was brought up in the Royal Commission doodah in Australia, because they were talking about the paedophiles in the congregations that were allowed to continue worshipping. They were not reported to anybody. They could just carry on with their lives, even though they had confessed or been found guilty of being a paedophile and a rapist or molester or whatever. And I think his name was Angus Stewart, the lawyer for the Australian Royal Commission. He asked, there was Terence O'Brien and another fellow, I can't remember his name, but he asked them, they were the representatives to the Watchtower, and he said something like, please tell us how you are providing a public service for the public when you allow paedophiles to run loose. And so even though you can claim, which we know is a lie anyway, that, oh, we protect the kids in the congregation, well, even if you were doing that, the fact that you let paedophiles out and they can go home and they can carry on at work, maybe they work in a school or near kids, that they're allowed to do what they want. They can see their own children and they will never know that their dad is a paedophile. His wife or ex-wife or whoever will never know that he's a paedophile. He's allowed to do what he wants, unchecked. So Angus Stewart asked, how exactly are you providing a public service to those people, to the public, who aren't Jehovah's Witnesses, who aren't subject to your laws, who are not under your authority, who aren't at the meeting so they can't hear any announcements if there are any made, they're not at elders' meetings so they don't know, they have no access to the secret list of paedophiles so they don't know. What are you doing? And you know what, Terence O'Brien and the other fella, they honestly couldn't answer. It was so embarrassing if you were a witness. I'd like to know actually if any Jehovah's Witnesses were watching that feedback and the live broadcast, and I'd like to know your thoughts on it. How do you think that your guys did? Because from my point of view, they did absolutely terribly. They really did. They were so bad it was laughable. But this guy, Terence O'Brien and the other fella, they basically kept parroting about, oh, the kids in the hall, the kids in the hall. And Angus Stewart kept saying, yes, but what about the kids who aren't in the hall? Like the ones in the rest of the whole universe and the world, what about those ones? And so it got me thinking, if Angus Stewart was more aggressive, I mean, perhaps he is, I've never met the fella, maybe he is, but if I were him anyway, my next move after this commission thing is over will be to aggressively challenge the status of charity for the witnesses in Australia. Because if they claim that they are charity because they're a public service, and yet with one question you can prove that they are absolutely doing the opposite of that, they're providing a public danger instead of a public service, then surely that is legal ground for removing their status. In which case, if that happens, hopefully they will become bankrupted, and that means at least the ones in Australia, the Bethel and everything there, the headquarters there, would all cease to function, perhaps. Perhaps the money would dry up, they wouldn't be able to print literature, they wouldn't be able to import anything, seeing as Australia is a very large import country because it's so isolated from the rest of the world and far away. So let's just imagine then that Australia has removed the charity status of the witnesses, they're now bankrupt, they can't operate anymore, everything is back to the old days and the dark ages, meeting in people's homes, stuff like that. Well, it suddenly occurred to me that Australia is part of the Commonwealth system, and the United Kingdom is sort of the head of that, right? The Great Britain is the centre of the Commonwealth system. So let's imagine that Australia implement this with this logical reasoning, well, they provide a public danger, blah, blah, blah. And let's say that the UK governments think, well, hang on a sec, these people are in our country as well, and we are exactly the same, investigating sex abuse cases where they have covered up these cases and hidden paedophiles and rapists in their congregations. It's the same deal. I'm hoping that perhaps the UK government will say, well, as you've done it in Australia and it seems to have worked so well, we'll do it here. I mean, wouldn't that be a great thing if they could just say in the United Kingdom, well, we're not going to have your charity status anymore. I mean, maybe they would struggle and carry on, but either way, it wouldn't be the same. And as we all know that the Anglo-American world power is in fact the world power right now, that the Great Britain and the United States of America have a very special relationship, they have like a bond and they consult each other, blah, blah, blah. Imagine that if it worked in the UK and Australia, possibly other countries as well, they're part of the Commonwealth. Imagine if the United States of America also decided, hey, we'll give that a shot. Take away the charity status. Well, how good would that would be, because the headquarters, the world headquarters, are in Walkill, in New York. Now let's imagine that the charity status is now gone. They now have to pay tax on everything, probably backlogged, and then whatever they owe now and for future. You know, how much money would that be? Would it be enough to bankrupt the headquarters or not? I'm not sure. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a mathematician, I don't know. But it's just worth giving some thought because of that case that France brought up a long time ago about removing their charity status. It's such a simple move and innocent, you know. Let's take away the charity status. What's the big deal, you know? They'll carry on either way. But if they can bankrupt them, then perhaps they can get rid of them, because it seems to me that the Watchtower organisation's main concern is money. You know, I mean, it was disgraceful with the Russia ban. There were too many articles and comments made about, oh, we've lost all of our fine Kingdom halls. And it was like, yeah, well, screw the Kingdom halls, they're just buildings, but what about the people? You know, their identities, have been taken away. It's not easy to deal with. But anyway, that is my theory that I've been thinking about these last couple of days, really. That if their survival is dependent solely on money, and that is in turn dependent on their charity status, and taking away that status would eventually bankrupt them and, you know, stop them from operating, then that'd be very cool. In fact, I find that is worth training to be a lawyer for, just so you could go and initiate this movement, which is what I'm tempted to do. So let's see what happens, Let's see what happens. But if anybody else has any thoughts about the Watchtower, I mean, do you think, listener, that the Watchtower Society will carry on indefinitely? Do you think it will last another 50 years? Do you think it will last another 10 years? Do you think it will last because they will tell people not to use the internet anymore? Do you think that they will use fear in that sense, or blah, blah, blah? You know, think about it and tell me what you think, if you like. As always, a word of caution. If you are, in fact, afraid of being found out or squealed upon by other witnesses or whoever, be anonymous. Make up another YouTube channel or whatever, use a different handle and comment that way. Because I see people, they're commenting and they're using their real names, and I'm just a little concerned, thinking, well, do you guys realise that elders and things probably do listen to these videos, or at least check them out and see who's on and who's not? So that's just worth bearing in mind, you know. I mean, take precautions now. But yeah, thank you for listening to my ramblings. It's very late in the day, so if I'm being incoherent, it's for that reason. I'm sorry. But yeah, please always do leave feedback. Again, if you're a witness watching this, naughty, you shouldn't be on this site, apparently. But good on you for listening to things with an open mind. Look, we're not preaching, I hope anyway, on these kind of sites. We're simply discussing possibilities. Perhaps the Watchtower will continue. Perhaps it will totally overhaul itself and become a wonderful religion, and there's no more paedophiles or rape. Women are treated as equals for once in history, and everybody's happy. But I seriously doubt it. And do not forget that though the religion may seem awesome to you because you're a guy listening to this, well, of course it's going to be awesome to you. But for women, it's not so much. Think about the army. The army is designed for men. There was no provision for women, not even a thought was given to women before. So when women were allowed to join, they found it very hard because they're in an unwelcome environment that basically is hostile and says, you have no place here. That's very hard to go into. And it's the same with the witnesses. It's a very male-oriented, male-dominated, patriarchal society where women are just seen as objects and accessories, and if they're good, they're a good wife or a virgin. If they're bad, they're a harlot or a baron or whatever. And it's like they treat women as if they're a different species, not just a different gender. So for goodness sake, have an open mind and think. If you're a man listening to this thinking, well, I don't know what's so wrong with this religion, don't just think about yourself. Think about everybody else. The women, the girls, there are more female witnesses than men, and they're not having a great time at all. And sadly, there's nothing they can do. They can't become elders. They can't go to Bethel on their own. They can't go to missionary school on their own. You have to be married. And if you're not married, you get pretty depressed pretty quickly because you can't do anything. Think about that. And then brothers have the cheek to mock the sisters and say, oh, they're all so desperate to get married. Why do you think? Because they're allowed a certain measure of freedom. The long chain that they are on, or the short chain they are on, that only prevents them, that only allows them to go so far, is lengthened very slightly when they get married. They have slightly more territory to roam in, but they're still chained to the wall. You know, don't forget. So stop treating women like they're a different fucking species, different species, and just view them as people. For goodness sake, is it that hard? And yeah, so anyways, thank you everybody for listening to this video. Comment below, blah blah blah, and keep your ears out and your eyes out for more to come. And thanks for all the great comments. It's been wonderful. Peace out.